All right, everybody, welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. The Detroit Lions dropped their preseason finale against the Houston Texans 26-7 at Ford Field on Saturday. The preseason is over, training camp is over, and now it's time to talk about Cutdown Day. First, we got to talk about some of the things that happened on the field today. And the lead story is Hendon Hooker failed to grab the brass ring. You know, he I think the word to say is flopped in this game. Sure. Had 2 completions through his first 4 quarters, ended up with 6 completions for 6 for 11, 70 yards and an INT. 4 of those completions and about 50 of those yards came on the final drive of the game with the Texans in prevent defense. Kind of a similar story to last week, to where Hooker couldn't move the ball. They get to the final possession of the game, defense backs off, and then he racks up a bunch of yards to make his box score look a little bit better. But I think we might have just watched his last game as a Detroit Lion.
Well, he had 4 completions, and you mentioned this in your story in that last drive. One of those completions is a check down, the other is a screen. And then the previous 2 completions before that were check downs to Jacob Sailors. Yeah. So he only really completed 2,
passes down the
field. Yeah. I think one was it Ronnie Bell, maybe another one to Malik Taylor. Yeah. We talked about it going in that it would take a devastatingly bad performance, in our opinion, to knock him out of the roster. And we've litigated that, of all the reasons why they would want to keep him, all the reasons why maybe they'd want to move on. I don't know if, this wasn't 5 interception disaster, but it was disaster in the sense of, it was just like every preseason game, the offense has felt like 5 steps slower with him under center versus Kyle Allen at quarterback. And this was just like one of the most dramatic instances of that, in my opinion. Yeah. It was just to a screeching halt when he checked in.
And I would argue it's worse than if he came out here and he threw 3 interceptions. He did throw 1 interception.
Which was not a great throw.
And it was a bad throw. Dominic Lovett was blanketed by his guy. He overthrew him. It was picked off by a safety.
Jalen Mills, by the way.
But I feel like if he threw 3 interceptions and he was chucking the ball downfield and all that other stuff, at least you could see something in that, right? Like, you could see the confidence, and I don't know why we're comparing these 2 things, because that didn't happen. But again, it just looks so bad,
tentative, and nervous.
Yes,
I feel like when I'm watching, I am kind of waiting for always the bad thing to happen.
Yeah. And so over his entire preseason, 22 completions on 40 attempts, 187 yards, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles, 0 touchdowns. And not only did he not throw a touchdown pass, the offense did not score a touchdown with him at quarterback. The only scoring drive that they had was last game against Miami, where they recovered a muff punt at the 27-yard line. He ends up actually scoring on that drive via rush, but it gets nullified because of a penalty. But, I mean, just the offense as a whole has not moved with him at quarterback. And today we went into a game thinking, okay, there's a lot of players on the bubble. It's our last chance to make an impression, and nobody really did. But specifically with the receivers, nobody was really given an opportunity. Yeah. Jackson Meeks did not catch a pass. Dominic Lovett did not catch a pass. Those 2 guys, I think, were in contention to be the final 2 guys in at the wide receiver position, but they didn't get a chance to show anything outside of, a few reps on special teams. Meeks had a nice play where he almost downed the ball at the 1-yard line, a punt. But he didn't get there in time. And then, Lovett, he was back there for kick and punt returns. I don't actually remember if he did end up returning one, though.
It appears that he had 1 kick return for 20 yards.
So that was the only touch from maybe the 2 most interesting bubble players coming into today. It's just not good enough. And I'm not just saying, you and I, like you just mentioned, have talked about it would have to be really bad. And I just, up until this week, I just didn't see a way that the Lions were going to be ready to cut bait altogether, because we talked about this on the podcast, just because of his, standing coming into the league when he was maybe a potential 1st or 2nd round pick. He ends up sliding to the 3rd round. He's got a knee injury.
3rd rounder that tore his ACL. That's a 2nd rounder without it.
Yes. And, there's just, we thought, hey, there might still be some upside in there. So we were under the impression that cutting him would be the end of his Lions career. He'd end up somewhere else. Some cellar dweller out there would claim him, whatever it may be. And I didn't really believe that was a possibility, because I thought they invested too much in him. The upside of him eventually working out, I think, was still relatively high. But after this week, and not just because of the play out there, I'm inclined to think that there's a pretty solid chance that they're going to end up cutting him. Let me find the quote from Dan Campbell because I did ask him about it. And earlier in the week, he was asked about, keeping 3 quarterbacks and stuff like that. So he said, so I asked him the pros and cons of keeping a third quarterback and just what it might mean for Hendon Hooker. And he said, look, it's always going to be about how much improvement do you believe there is? Because, look, we're talking about Hooker right now. How much development do you believe there still is? Sometimes does a player need to change the scenery? What about our own depth in those areas? I mentioned this the other day relative to that. Maybe there is room to grow. But is it worth it for the depth that we need at O-line, D-line, receiver, DB? So those are all the things you have to weigh. Look, I wish Hooker, and I know he does, would have had a better outing, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's not like he was playing with our first O-line or the first team skill position, all of that. So you take all of it into account as well. I thought he was prepared. I thought he was ready. Looked pretty calm. Just circumstances didn't work out today. That's all. That last part, it's all well and good. But you don't talk about a player maybe needing a change of scenery if you're not really thinking about cutting him, especially at a quarterback position, one that's so much, to do with confidence and stuff like that. And here Dan Campbell is, I don't want to say right in his final chapter in the press conference, but it kind of did seem that way in real time.
So 2 things. Dan Campbell actually spoke about the whole 3 quarterback thing. This was an extension of some comments that he made earlier in the week. And he said, given what happened last year, like they are a little bit scarred of like seeing how much they needed the depth last year. Mm-hmm. And like, he's like depth. Like we thought it was important before. We think it's 100 times more important now. And that could lead you to not wanting to have 3 quarterbacks on a Super Bowl contending roster. To put the bow on the Hendon thing, and then we'll move on to Kyle and some other guys. I genuinely do, when I watch him in these games, like I said, I'm like expecting something bad to happen. And I feel bad because it feels like I'm just watching whenever he goes out there, his confidence is utterly zapped. And, I'm not going to say that for all of training camp, he's been a rock star in practices. I would venture to say for like the first 2 weeks, he was a rock star. I think him and Kyle Allen both were awesome. And I think since the preseason started, you've seen him kind of also maybe slow down there, but it still hasn't been as bad as like we've seen out on the field. Dang near night and day. Like
nothing on the field is something that nothing on the practice field is something that we've seen out here. Every single week, I would even go as far as to say I go into the game with a little bit of intrigue about like, okay, like he did all right in practice this week. And I mean, obviously when you do this 4 times, it dissipates over time. So definitely a lot less so this week than I was going into the Atlanta game, for example. But I think every week the way he looked at practice kind of reset to me his momentum, and then he'd come in here and just keep it right back rolling again in a negative direction. So I think that's all we got on that, but that was the lead story of the day. That was kind of the thing that we were watching the closest. The silver lining.
It's the thing that I'm still watching closest into cut down day.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the story, in my opinion.
The silver lining is that this isn't a situation where Hendon Hooker doesn't work out and now you don't have a backup quarterback, because Kyle Allen rules. He was awesome again today, 5 for 5, 66 yards, and a 33-yard touchdown to Isaac Tisla. That was arguably the best throw of any Lions quarterback in the preseason so far. Just a go ball down the sideline after Tisla had completed the 3rd down catch by crossing up a DB on a slant route. Then he just runs down the sideline, outruns a DB. Kyle Allen puts it right into his breadbasket. Could have not have had a better throw, and away we go.
I just shake my head that every time the ball is in the air going towards Tesla, for the past 3 weeks when he scored these touchdowns, I remember against Miami, they throw it, and I'm just like, surely not this one. And then he comes down with it, and then they throw this fade, and I'm like, surely it's not going to just keep going well. Like, you know what I mean? It can't just be purely exponential, and it just is. And he keeps just making every play, every ball that's in his area, he seems to catch. 13 targets this preseason, 10 receptions, 140-something yards, 3 touchdowns. He has been just above and beyond our expectations for him. And Dan Campbell kind of said as much in the press conference afterwards, where he talked about, he cautioned, he's not like driving like the Isaac Tesla Megatron hype train, but he said, given that he's only been here for 6 weeks, I'd venture, and I'm saying I as Dan Campbell, I'd venture to say he's ahead of what most receivers in his position would be after only having 6 weeks of NFL experience, NFL training camp. And he ended it his talking about Tesla by saying, I think, he might be able to help us sooner rather than later, earlier in the season than maybe that even they, I think, expected when they drafted him.
Yeah. Bubble watch, we should talk about some guys in the bubble. We hit the wide receiver position. Love it. Meeks did not show anything. Ronnie Bell, again, got his opportunity towards the end of the game where he got hit with a wide open pass, and that's all good and well, but I just don't know how much it factors into the decision that they have to make this upcoming Tuesday. Other places on the roster, though, running backs didn't really move me, if I'm being honest. Craig Reynolds had a nice catch and run. Jacob Sailors had a nice catch and run, but Sailors, 9 attempts, 32 yards, average of 3.6. Craig Reynolds, 5 rushes, 12 yards, average of 2.4, and Deion Jackson, 2 rushes for 3 yards, average of 1.5. I do think that roster is pretty much set for the most part. It's just a matter of, are they going to keep both Vaki and Reynolds? And with the injuries that we've seen to Vaki over these last couple of weeks, I'm inclined to circle back and think that they're going to end up with Craig Reynolds on this roster. Jacob Sailors, though, an interesting guy, came in, again, not the world's best production today, but has ran hard, has impressed in practice, and for the most part, I think has made the most of his opportunities as well.
I'd expect him to be a practice squad guy at this point, and that they carried 5 last year. They carried the 4 that we've talked about that we think they're going to carry again, and Jamar Jefferson, and I think it'll be Jacob Sailors in that spot this year.
Yeah. Defensively, I'm disappointing across the board except for 2 guys. Trevor Nowaski, linebacker, I think he had something like 8 or 9 tackles. And then Lauren Strickland also coming up with about 9 tackles or something like that. They were both very good. Strickland, I don't know if it's going to be enough. I think for the most part, he was repping towards the bottom of the depth chart for almost the entirety of camp. Comes out today, has a couple big hits, has a tackle for loss.
A big one, too, 4 yards.
Yep. And then Nowaski, I think, is a guy who was probably, I think a lot of people have him on the fence. I've had him in on most of my 53-man projections. So we'll see which direction that goes. But, Dan Campbell was asked, it didn't look like anybody stood out there today. Do you agree? And he said, yeah, I kind of do. Like, it'll be one of those things where when we go back and watch the tape, then we'll find some guys who did some dirty work and, things that impress us. But for right now, if you're asking me who I thought stood out today on the bubble watch, it really wasn't anybody. So those 2 guys I thought were the 2 biggest standouts. You got anything on them before we?
How about Nowaski wearing the green dot?
Yeah, Nowaski did wear the green dot, and I think that bodes well for his chances of making the roster as well.
When you have a fringe guy, and I'll use the example of Kingsley Agwakin, when you have a guy that you're not 100% sure is going to make the roster, but you see the lines using him in other spots, Kingsley getting some guard reps, Nowaski he plays Sam, but also getting some off-ball reps, wearing the green dot, like them trying to add more, kind of to justify his spot on the roster. I think that's a very good sign. Like when a bubble guy is getting used in other areas, it's like, okay, I think they're thinking that this guy's going to make the team. Let's have him wear multiple hats.
Yeah. As a whole, the pass rush was extremely disappointing. You remarked to me at one point in the game, I don't think they have a pressure yet. This was late in the second quarter. That was immediately followed by Nate Lynn getting a hit on Graham Mertz that ultimately did not officially count because the play was called back for a penalty. But you won the rep nonetheless. And then the very next play, Alquidi Muhammad comes in. He gets the only sack of the day for the Lions. But outside of that, just really, really disappointing as well. Again, at a position, defensive line, defensive end, where somebody could have stepped up.
It's thin. They need someone.
It was thin. There are guys that need to step up. There are going to be, I don't know how to exactly say this, but depth guys who make the roster who, maybe aren't shoo-ins to begin the year. Guys are not bona fide studs, and they were looking for guys to stand out, and it's gone a little bit up and down. We've seen the Nate Lynn's, the Keith Coopers, the Pat O'Connors. All those guys kind of put together some decent days of practice or maybe a game here or there, but with everything on the line, nobody showed up, I thought.
The Lions forced the Texans into 5 third and 7 or longers. No sacks on those plays on your pin your ears back, 3rd and long, obvious passing situations. The Texans convert 2 of them themselves, and then another one was a conversion by virtue of Nick Whiteside getting a defensive holding, automatic first down. So they convert 60% of their 3rd and longs, and you don't get a sack. And from memory of those plays, I don't think they were particularly close either on any of them. Because with Hassanin on the shelf for a while, with Pascal's kind of return cloudy at this point, Dan originally said early September and then said it's going to be later than that. So at this point, you don't have him for right now. He's just not in. He's not in the plans right now. He can't be. It's Hutch. It's Davenport. It's Aquadin Muhammad.
Yeah,
kind of end of sentence of guys that you feel really confident in. And I do think if you force me to make a 53-man roster right now, I think Nate Lynn is in because he has been good in the preseason prior.
Sorry, I was calling Zadarius Smith over here.
I was distracted. I was like, he picked up his phone and he was typing on his phone. I was like, what is he typing about?
Yeah.
I think Nate Lynn is probably the one is going to be the fourth guy, or Zadarius Smith between now and week 1. They need something. They need something else because we've talked about this with Davenport a ton. Very, very good player, very good for what they do, and it's just the reality of the situation, the injuries. If he goes down, you're starting Aquadin Muhammad again, like you were last year, opposite Hutch, and Nate Lynn is the first guy up behind him.
Yep.
It's not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, and that's no disrespect to those players, but Aquadin Muhammad was a guy who was signed off the street last year. Nate Lynn, a UDFA last season, had a very good training camp, got hurt early, missed the entire season. I think he's a promising player, but you don't want him going into the season as your edge 2 or edge 3. And,
guys that I think are 100% worthy of roster spots. Like Aquadin Muhammad is a lock. Nate Lynn is close to it. Yeah. Like 100% worthy of a roster spot. Just because you're worthy of a roster spot, I don't think you want to roll them into Lambeau in week 1.
Yeah. I would venture to say the DBs were awful in this game. Is that a fair characterization?
That's right.
The Texans quarterbacks, 25 for 32. I looked sometime in the third or fourth quarter, and I said, there's not been a single pass defensed in this game. No pass breakups up until Tyson Russell ends up catching, I don't want to call it a lucky interceptions. He worked for it in some capacity, but the ball literally went in and out of Quintez Cephas's hands onto his helmet, and then he bobbled it like up in the air, and Tyson Russell was just like, oh, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
And that was their one and only pass breakup of the entire day. Nick Whiteside, a guy who was coming in with all the momentum in the world at his back, and had a significant opportunity to make the he's one of those guys who, coming into this game, I thought he was right there the entire time, and he was a guy who could have made the roster today. He didn't. There were at least 4 chunk plays that went for 15, 20 yards where he was the closest defender on. He did not look good at all.
No, and
a penalty.
And a penalty, and the defensive holding. Yeah, I do still think, given his rapid rise, he signed, what was it, I think July 28th, so 3 weeks and basically ago. I do think there is a spot for him on the practice squad, and I do think that is a feat in itself. But yeah, it was those first however many days, it was 15 days, were awesome and had us think wow, maybe he can pull the upset. I would not pick him to make the upset on Tuesday.
Yeah. I think that's all I got. We do have a couple of injury updates that are pretty major. Graham Glasgow, we talked to Dan Campbell after the game. He said that Graham Glasgow's injury, which he suffered in Thursday's joint practice against the Texans, left early with a lower leg injury. A big problem if it was anything serious. But it is not. Dan Campbell saying today that he should be good. Running back Sione Vaki, who also left Thursday's practice and did not play in today's game, said it could be a tick longer than Graham Glasgow, but ultimately, hopefully, not something major. And then lastly, we do have an unfortunate update on Ezekiel Turner, a linebacker who was having a really solid game to this point and had a really good game last week, actually. He ends up going down with what seems to be a pretty significant foot/ankle area injury. Dan Campbell saying after the game that it's not good. So, he was on crutches in the locker room after the game.
Turner's one of those guys where I would not have projected him to make the roster, but they kept 7 linebackers last year. I don't think we would have expected them maybe to keep a guy like Ben Neiman last year, and they did.
Yeah.
And I think Turner would have been first up on those guys of a guy that was trending in the right direction, a really good special teamer. He was signed because he's a really good special teamer, and then also he stepped up last year and he had to play a bunch of snaps for them. Yeah. He's a guy that I think maybe would have been the ultimate dark horse. But But no, yeah, it's a shame. He got hurt, went to the bench, then carted to the locker room from the bench. So it didn't look great. And it's a shame.
Crutches in the locker room.
Yeah.
So, all right, we will be back with another episode on Monday night after Cutdown Day, bringing you all the latest news, who's in, who's out, all that good stuff. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Please press that subscribe button, that like button, wherever you're watching. We'll see you guys next time.